When I first came to Singapore, one thing surprised me more than anything else: the way they've made the absolute best use of their land. Singapore is a tiny country, yet everywhere you look, you see creativity in how space is used. Coming from Ghana, where land stretches endlessly, it really opened my eyes. It made me wonder, how can such a small place feel so big? Singapore is small. In fact, if you compare it to my country Ghana, Singapore could fit inside Ghana more than 350 times. That is how little land they have. Yet, instead of seeing it as a weakness, they turned it into their greatest strength. And that is what surprised me the most. So how did Singapore transform a disadvantage into an advantage? Let us look at the strategies that they used. In Singapore, when they ran out of land, they didn't give up. They went to the sea. Through land reclamation, they've practically expanded their country by creating new land out of the ocean. Today, some of the most iconic places in Singapore, like Marina Bay Sands, sit on reclaimed land. This is enough proof that even nature's limits can be pushed back with creativity and engineering. While many of us dream of big houses with large compounds, Singapore had no choice but to think differently. Instead of building wide, they built high. High-rise apartments became the solution, giving millions of people quality housing within a tiny space. And the amazing part, these aren't just buildings stacked on top of each other. They come with schools, shops, parks, and even hawker centers, all integrated into the community. Singapore also asked an important question: how do we stay green in a concrete jungle? Their answer was brilliant. Rooftop gardens, vertical farming on walls, and even underground storage to free up surface land. They are even shifting transport infrastructure underground so that the surface can be used for people instead of traffic. This is a good example of how development doesn't always have to come at the cost of nature. You can actually have both. One of the things that really sets this country apart is how well they plan. Every space is carefully thought out, from housing estates to transport systems. It looks like nothing is left to chance in this country. Zoning laws ensure that industries, businesses, and homes don't clash, but actually support each other. And the MRT system, it connects the whole island so efficiently that you don't even need a car to live comfortably. That kind of planning makes the whole city feel like it's working in harmony. One thing that really amazed me is how Singapore has used its limited land not just for housing and business, but also for tourism. With so little space, they've still managed to create some of the world's most famous attractions. Think about Marina Bay Sands, built on reclaimed land, yet today it's a global icon. Gardens by the Bay with those futuristic super trees is another example of turning limited land into something spectacular. And then there is Sentosa Island, transformed into a full tourist paradise with beaches, resorts, and theme parks. As a traveler walking through these places, I kept thinking, this is smart land use. Every piece of land here has a purpose, and often that purpose is not just to serve locals, but also to welcome millions of visitors from around the world. My first trip to Singapore taught me one powerful lesson. It's not about how much land you have, but rather how wisely you use it. Singapore treats every square meter like treasure, and maybe that's what we need to learn if we want to build cities that last. One question lingered on my mind the whole time I was in Singapore. With so little land, how do they feed almost 6 million people? Back in Ghana, you can drive for hours and see farmland stretching to the horizon. But here, land is precious and very little of it is arable. In fact, Singapore imports over 90% of its food. For most countries, that would be seen as a serious weakness. But Singapore once again took that challenge and turned it into innovation. They came up with what is called the 30 by 30 vision. The goal is simple but ambitious: to produce 30% of their own nutritional needs locally by the year 2030. And the ways they are doing this are fascinating. I saw vertical farms where vegetables are grown in tall racks, stacked one above the other, almost like books on a shelf. Rooftops that would normally just be empty concrete are being transformed into greenhouses. Hydroponic systems use nutrient-rich water instead of soil, making farming possible in the middle of the city. And then there are high-tech fish farms producing seafood in controlled environments to ensure a steady local supply. This was honestly eye-opening to witness. Imagine walking through a shopping mall, looking up and realizing the roof above you is producing vegetables, or taking a ride on the MRT and knowing that just nearby, a vertical farm is working around the clock to feed the people. That's the level of creativity Singapore is putting into food security. But it also made me think about how different countries handle this problem. Take the United Arab Emirates, for example. Like Singapore, the UAE has very little arable land, and extreme heat and water scarcity makes farming almost impossible. Their solution has been bold. They've gone overseas. The UAE invests heavily in farmland abroad, especially in fertile African regions like Sudan, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Zambia. By leasing or buying massive tracts of land, they grow crops like rice, corn, and vegetables and ship them back home. In this way, the UAE secures a reliable food pipeline for its population, even if nothing can grow naturally in the desert. So I asked myself, does Singapore do the same thing? Do they invest in overseas farmland to feed their people? The answer is yes, but in a very different way. Singapore encourages some of its food companies to explore partnerships and investments abroad, but not on the same massive scale as the UAE. Instead, Singapore's main strategy rests on three pillars: diversify where food is imported from, stockpile reserves for emergencies, and grow as much as possible locally using technology. This approach fascinated me because it shows how two land-scarce nations can take very different paths. The UAE looks outward, buying land abroad to guarantee food supply. Singapore, on the other hand, looks both outward and inward, importing widely, while also squeezing every drop of potential out of its own limited space. And here is where it really struck me as an African. In Ghana, we have the opposite problem. We have the land, the soil, the water, and the sun. Yet food shortages still happen. Harvests rot because of poor storage. Infrastructure is lacking, and planning is inconsistent. Watching Singapore innovate with almost nothing made me realize Africa doesn't lack land. We lack the systems to make the most of it. If we combined our abundance with Singapore's level of innovation and discipline, not only could we feed ourselves, but we could feed the world.